Welcome back. You're watching Eye on India, and we're discussing the future of jobs over the next 5 years. Mr. Chandrasekhar, let's talk about the fact that the demographic advantage that we keep talking about, and that has a lot to do with the report that's been put out. Millennials will form 30% of the population, and that will continue to drive growth, consumption, etc. as we go forward. There's a lot of talk around the Uberization, for instance, of jobs as India moves forward. What is that going to mean? There's also this business of, Mudra, Startup India, and focusing on creating entrepreneurs, micro-entrepreneurs. What is that realistically going to be able to create the kind of jobs that we need to create?
I think what's important is that these technologies are not only changing the jobs and the skills required, they're also changing the nature of work itself. And we may be well entering an era where jobs in the traditional sense may give place increasingly to what is called the gig economy, where people are working with multiple employers and so on. The big advantage in the gig economy is, referring to the earlier points made, it also enables people to work wherever they are, whenever they want, and in small slices. So it makes it easier, for example, for women, even those who are homemakers, to actually enter into the formal economy and contribute. The second thing is, if you look at the newer and more powerful technologies, they are making it possible to deliver key services like healthcare, like education, even in agriculture. We've seen huge amounts of wastage, overuse of inputs. All of this can be radically transformed through the use of these technologies, which is where innovation and startups come in, because there it is, the entrepreneurship is about taking the technologies and then finding space for them to transform sectors. And I think the economic opportunities there and the job opportunities there are immense. I mean, just think, if you can change the agricultural productivity in India, which is abysmally low, by even 2%, how much it would add to the economy, how many jobs in the entire supply chain it would create. You take e-commerce. E-commerce has destroyed certain jobs in retail.
But it's also created.
But it's created so many jobs in the courier segment, within the e-commerce industry, and so on. And the same can happen in what you call the Uberization across sectors. So sector after sector, I think we need to have a positive game plan to embrace change and not to resist it. To resist it, I think, is going to make things much worse. And the consequences much more serious. So
Anurag, if I can ask you about the key challenges that we need to now focus on. As Mr. Chandrasekhar pointed out, this is inevitable. It is upon us. There's no looking back, so to speak. What are the top challenges that we now need to take on head on?
So I think the challenges can be looked upon from a perspective of policy, and work needs to be done by the government. Challenges also are challenges that need to be addressed by corporates. And I would also say there are challenges when it comes to us as a society. Let me start by challenges from an individual or society perspective. I think it's important that the society, people who are going to come into the job market over the next few years, understand the change that's happening. So if I was to look at students today, the courses that they're following, I think it's important for them to understand what are the courses, what are the jobs of the future, and there's a role that...
Data scientists, visual effects, graphics artists, so on and so forth. That's the sort of stuff that you ought to be focusing on.
Absolutely. Then there's a role that teachers, mentors, parents all need to play to address some of those potential imbalance that might exist. I think the other part is also around, this change of frame from a 9 to 6 job only to what Mr. Chandrasekhar talked about, the gig economy. We were surprised that India today has 24% of the worldwide gig economy.
Really?
And it's as big as that. 25% of the total gig economy of the world is out of India. So it's a reality that people need to understand that the 9 to 6 job would continue, but needs to transition to a scenario where you're very comfortable working for 5, 6. I think the other challenge is this mindset of saying that, I graduated as a mechanical engineer today. It guarantees me a 40-year-long career. Today, skill redundancy is a reality. It might be 15 years today, it might come down. So lifelong learning, and the point that Arun made, and around the government investing in promoting lifelong learning around all areas. I think from an individual perspective, some of those challenges that need to be addressed. From a government perspective, I think the question that you rightly asked, that there seems to be a significant gap that's emerging if you look at it from a top level. But as you dive deeper, one can see that different sectors will have very different plays in terms of absorbing people. The concept there is employment elasticity. What it means is that with every 10% increase in GDP, what's the number of additional jobs that can be created? And if the government looks at it deeply, what emerges is that sectors like textile, sectors like construction, sectors like leather have a far higher employment elasticity. And hence the need to invest in some of those sectors, incentivize so some of those are potential mechanisms that can be looked at for handling these challenges.
You're absolutely right that we need to continue to focus on the labor-intensive sectors, even as we talk about high-tech and manufacturing in India from a high-tech perspective. But Arun, let me then ask you from a corporate sector's perspective, and I know that the Indian IT sector spends billions of dollars on skilling people. I mean, what is it when we talk about skilling for new jobs in the future? What kind of investments are we actually talking about between the private sector as well as the government? What is it going to take?
So when we look at typically taking the example of the IT sector, the skill sets which the report speaks of is they're looking at people with IoT skills, people with AI kind of skills, those kind of skill sets. Now each of these skill sets is like these can be delivered to these workforce in a modular format. It can be delivered in a digital format. So it doesn't mean that there's a huge investment required.
Sure.
And these are things which people themselves individually can pick up, or companies also can sponsor. So I don't see that in terms of reskilling for these kind of skill sets, you need a huge kind of infrastructural kind of investment. It's more on the digital, the content, and those kind of elements of the investments are required.
All right, so gentlemen, let me end then by asking, and I want just a word from both you, Mr. Chandrasekhar, as well as you, Mr. Koshi. And let me start by asking you, Mr. Chandrasekhar, given where we stand today, the opportunities as well as the challenges, do you feel more optimistic about the jobs market in 2022, or are you approaching it with more caution?
I think it's a mix of, on one side, apprehension because of the enormity of the change, but also optimism because there are huge opportunities if we do things right. These technologies are so powerful, and application across sectors. Earlier it was about value within the technology sector or within a domain. Increasingly, value is at the junction between technology and a domain. So that's where we need to focus on, and all the points that were made about skilling. I think if we can get these right, there's a huge opportunity to improve lives of people across the country and in sectors where we are underserved at the moment. And create jobs in the process. So I would be optimistic as well, but we need to do a lot of things to unlock that.
So on a scale of 10, where are we today? And as we move the needle towards more formalization of the Indian economy and the opportunities and challenges that come along with it, how ready are we on a scale of 1 to 10?
Oh, that is a very tough question. But I would say it is in the middle somewhere now. It is a midway stretch. You can go down, you can go up. But the point is that the youth, that up to 2035, what we call the demographic bulge or the demographic dividend is certainly there. Then from the pyramidal structure, the demographic become a kite structure. So this 12 years or whatever we have now, 8 years or which we have actively, we need to have a very clear policy. And luckily the 2017 Abu Dhabi Youth Declaration, there is a sentence which clearly stresses the importance of skills in the present era of the 4th industrial revolution. Now India is getting globalized with this youth movement, which is recognizing already the challenges. And if we can actually make them conscious, look, you require lifelong learning. Acquisition of skills at a young age and in a basket of skills which you need to develop is critical. And the skill providers raising the bar to actually become really quality skill providers. And then the government really looking that skills creation is only one part of the job.
Job creation and demand.
Creation
absolutely. Absolutely. And on that note, gentlemen, we will have to leave it there. Appreciate you joining us here to discuss this special report that's been put together by EY, FICCI and NASSCOM. It is going to be a challenge, but it is also an opportunity that India will need to embrace as we get ready for jobs in the next 5 years. From all of us here for now, many thanks for watching.